Michael, thank you for joining me today. Would you mind just giving a bit of an intro to yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Michael Thomson. I'm currently Chief Technical Officer at CloudConnect, which is a new company that we've launched in the last couple of months. So for my history, I've worked for the last 12 years or so in data extraction from business documents, so human readable documents. And that's what our startup is about, is taking that technology forwards and starting a new company on it.
So you made the trip down from, is it North Shields?
It's Shymore, so it's very, very close, North Tyneside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you making the trip down and also hosting like a tech leaders dinner this evening. So it's great to have you come there. So sort of killing two birds with one stone. I guess a good question to ask, like how did we get here? So you're currently a chief technical officer at a new startup, but you've been in tech for about 12 years, is that right?
Yeah, it's give or take. July 22nd, 2013 is when I took my first job, so yes.
And then I guess let's go right back to the start. When did you get interested in tech?
So I think technology has always been one of my passions. So I think I always wanted a computer when I was very young. So I think we got our first computer in my house when I was maybe 8 or 9 years old. And that was something that was always something I wanted. I was only allowed on for an hour a day to protect my eyes and make sure I did outdoor things and all that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, very young age, I was as much on the computer as I could possibly get. It was gaming is what I did for a long time, was the kind of entry point in. I think in terms of coding, the first code I ever wrote was MySpace. So when MySpace launched, you could edit your page in HTML code. So that was the first coding I ever did.
Genuinely, that was mine as well. So I've never really done like any development, but I do remember using like HTML for MySpace as well. So yeah, funny.
That was the very first entry point. It took a while. I mean, I was 17 before I decided development was the career I wanted to go in, so before I decided that's where my career was going to be. But yeah, I mean, all through my teenage years, I was very into computers. I was into hardware because I was into gaming, so I wanted better hardware, so I wanted to understand what better hardware was. And then my first job was around being able to fund my first computer. So that I'd bought with my own money and was actually what I wanted it to be.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So obviously always passionate about computers and tech, and even your first job was to try and get a computer, which is great to hear. When getting into software development, did you go down, I guess, more of a traditional route of college, university, or were you did you like learn it and develop it yourself out of your passion? Yeah,
so I had a little bit of a head start of things that I'd done myself. I intentionally didn't do it for A levels because I didn't want to kill my passion, because that's an experience I have, is that if I do it formally, it becomes boring, so I didn't want to do that. But yeah, I decided I was and ahhing, and I decided I wanted to do it for a career. Around 17, I spoke to somebody that I knew who was a software developer, and I asked the questions of what would I need to do to understand if A, I wanted to do this, if it was going to be enjoyable for me, and B, whether it was my skill set. And he gave me a coding challenge, which was 99 green bottles. That was the challenge. It was create a program that writes out all the words to 99 green bottles where, it's a loop. There's a if statement at the end for, does it have an S on the end or not for the final one. So I went away and did that. It was fun. I managed to do it. And then I was like, right, I'm doing this. And went down the path of how do I do this? And got a computer science degree. So that was the path I took, computer science at Newcastle. And then into a job after that.
Yeah. Did you do a sandwich course, or were you straight into...
No, I very much wanted to finish as fast as I could.
Yeah.
So straight through and out the other end. I actually... I wasn't keen on education, so a formal education. So I did a lot of my own thing all the way through university and during my A levels. And I wanted the piece of paper so that I could get the job. But I tried to self-teach as much as I could within that.
Yeah. How was your journey when you graduated in terms of finding a job? Did you find it challenging? Were you able to find one quickly?
I was very targeted in what I wanted to do. So it was very important to me that I wanted to join a startup. I wanted to work in something specifically business to business, and I wanted to work in something that was very clearly delivering value to the customer, so that it wasn't vaporware or unsustainable or anything like that. So I was quite selective in what I took.
Yeah. It's quite interesting that though, because why were you that selective? What sort of influenced you to think of that?
I think I value long-term sustainability. So I think if you are just producing, vaporware or something, it's not going to work forever. So that's not something I wanted to engage with. I think it is a very obvious case to be made for your software if you are, if you can end up in a career where you are just obvious. It's like you save the customer money, or the customer makes money they wouldn't have otherwise made. It's very easy to sell that.
Yeah.
So
I mean, the reason I ask that is because typically I think when I was in university, when I was leaving, like you wanted to like target who the biggest companies are in like your sector or specialism. So I think it's quite interesting that you wanted to work for a startup and like, I guess.
So HP used to have a office in the Cobalt Business Park, and they used to offer a graduate scheme, and that was my backup choice if I didn't find anything. But I very much didn't want to do that. I wanted to join a startup, and I remember the HP graduate scheme. It paid 28,000, I think, at the time, and I took 18 for my job, and willingly, to go and do that.
How did you find the job then? So CloudTrade was the first company you worked for.
Yeah, so they were advertised on the university jobs board, was where they were advertised. It was and they were offering very much what I wanted, is we can't pay you, but we'll give you a good time. And that was very much what I wanted.
So I think working for a startup, you do get a lot of I guess working in smaller business, you're going to be exposed to a lot more. Sometimes work for a large organisation. This is across all sectors. I remember working in recruitment when I worked for a much larger company.
Yep.
You kind of just feel like you're a very small cog in a large wheel, and you kind of get given a set, I guess, specialism that you work to, and you don't see anything else. Whereas I can imagine that, especially at a startup, maybe the pressures are a little bit more.
So you have to deliver very quickly.
Yeah, and the spotlight is on as well, because obviously you know that if there's only like maybe 4 or 5, up to 10 people in the office, then it's quite easy to see like who, how much everybody's contributing.
Yep. Well, for me, there was me and my CTO, and it was just the two of us.
Oh,
so,
okay. So when you joined, it was just one person?
Just me and him, yeah.
Right, okay. And that's in the tech team, though, right? Because did you say you were like the fifth?
Yeah, we had 5 people. So the makeup of the company was, we had the CEO, who was mostly doing commercial things. We had a CCO, who was also doing commercial things. Yeah. We had a guy who was running the operations of the company and just doing all of that. Yeah. And CTO, who was doing all of the development at that point, and then me.
So were you kind of maybe the first non-C-level developer, like at that time?
Yes. So the other person who led the operations team was our CEO's son, and he was came on for minimal money type thing, and I was the first person who they could afford to actually pay salary to.
Okay. Yeah. And how long had they been established at that point?
It's hard to pinpoint because there was a while where they were in development mode where no customers, but it was a matter of months. It was months of having a live revenue stream. So as soon as they got revenue, they hired, and that was me.
Great. And then within 5.5 years, you were in the head of engineering position there. And at that point, how many developers did you have that worked underneath you?
Yeah, so I took the position around the same time. We took some investment. So we took some investment and grew the team. I think that the point at which I took the position, we maybe had 4 or 5 developers working under me, but then we grew quite quickly after that. So we grew from 4 or 5 to about 12 or 13 within maybe a year or 2.
Yeah.
So that was the period that I was running things.
Yeah. And going into management then, was it I guess an ambition of yours, or was it something that you were kind of fell into?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this a bit before we came in, but it was something I've always wanted to do. So very early on in my childhood, one of the key lessons that one of my grandmother taught me, I suppose, was my granddad had been doing an engineering job in I suppose the 80s, 90s. And it had been made redundant. And she always said that one of the reasons why that happened was that they didn't let the engineers get into management, and the management people made bad decisions. And she said, never let anybody tell you that you can't be a manager because you're too good of an engineer, and I took that advice to heart, and it was always my ambition to first become a good engineer, and then after you've become a good engineer, then become a good manager. So I always wanted to go down that path. It was just a question of executing on that, really.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that. It's great because it's obviously very personal to you, and then it's the direction you took as well. How many? I guess at what stage then did you become a manager? Was it when you had a few more people in the team, and then was it naturally what you got into? Had you spoken to the leadership team to say, this is what I want to do, and this is what I can bring to the role?
So it was we had a very loose structure to begin with. So to begin with, it was just me and one other person was the technical team. There wasn't very much of a need for management. And as we grew, I was normally the person who would onboard the new people. So, and that was something that I personally volunteered for. I asked to be in the interviews. I asked to do that. And it was just one of my passions. So I brought the new people up. I mentored them through the first 6 months or whatever it was. And it got to the point where I was just doing most of that side of things. And there became a point around the time when we took investment where that needed to really be formalised. So the CTO, he's always been a very good engineer and very good person to come up with a vision, right? And that was his main contribution to the company. By his own admission, he didn't have very much interest in people management, right? So when it came to the point where we needed somebody like that, we reached a decision point. Do we hire somebody or promote from within? And I said, I'll do that. And I had to go and do an interview and all that kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah.
But I ended up getting that job.
Oh, brilliant. And then getting into management then, did you learn on the job? Did you do any formal training? Did you do any self-education on what it takes?
I've always been I always knew I wanted to do this, so I've done a lot of informal self-education throughout my whole life. I've done a lot of, watching this kind of podcast to see other people who've gone through the journey. How did they do it? What were the lessons that they learned? Yeah. When I was in university, I read Steve Jobs's biography, and that was something that set a lot of cogs whirring, Yeah. So I've done a lot of that kind of thing. I've spent a lot of time talking to people. Yeah. But no, I didn't do any training courses or anything like that. And I've done a lot of learning on the job. Yeah. I'm very keen on just learning by doing.
Do you think that's something that you have to continue doing as a manager?
I think you can't stop ever, but I think anybody in tech has to be learning all the time.
Yeah. How would you describe your leadership and management style then?
Yeah, so I think I'm quite unique and controversial sometimes, actually. I've been described as organised chaos. So I'm not very much a process person. I believe in being minimal, actually. So I think you shouldn't put process in place unless you need to. When you've encountered a problem, now it's time for a process. But until that point, no, I believe in being very adaptive. So if you are encountering a problem, fix that. And it's not about follow the best practice approach that all the managers say to follow. It's a case of what problems are you encountering and how do I solve that problem? And if you're not encountering a problem, don't change it, and if you are doing really well at something, why? And play to that, So I'm a little bit, I don't follow the herd on some of the management things. Yeah. But yeah.
I think that's the unique thing about management. I don't think there's one size fits all, because each team, each company has their own unique challenges or unique things that are going on, their unique culture and stuff, which we'll probably talk about in a little while. So that's why I'm always interested in asking that, because I can guarantee I'll almost always get a different answer. Mm-hmm. Obviously, people can read management books and learn lessons, but once you're in there, there's certain things elements that you can take, but you almost work to your own strength as well, because you do put your own personality to it as well.
I read the Phoenix Project, if you've read that, and the Unicorn Project, which is the sequel, I think. Oh, I can't remember which way around they go, but they were very good books, and they're novels, they're fiction, but they have a lot of insights in that are good for a manager in this space.
Yeah. Did you sort out any mentors, not even just for management, but even for development over the years?
I did a lot of this when I was a teenager, right? So not so much since. My mentors have been people within my company since then, but I did a lot when I was a teenager. I spent a lot of time on the internet and spent a lot of time interacting with adults who did jobs, which is a thing that not very many people were doing at my age at that time, but that's what I was doing. I spent a lot of time online talking to people with experience in this area because it was something I knew. I didn't know that I wanted to do tech. I knew I wanted to do business. So I spoke to a lot of professionals doing jobs,
I'll talk a little bit about culture. So Peter Drucker famously said, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on this quote?
Yeah, I think you need both. I think that you need to have a so the Spotify have a presentation they do about management styles, which I thought was really good. They have a quadrants thing where they say you've got to have alignment but autonomy. Right? It's the catchphrase: high alignment, high autonomy. You need to have a vision. You need to have everybody pulling in the same direction, all that kind of thing. The strategy needs to make sense. But ultimately, you are only as strong as the people who are doing the actual work. And a lot of the time, that depends on culture, how well they're going to perform. They need to be committed. They need to be invested. They need to be working really hard. They need to be, doing effective work. And that's down to culture a lot of the time, not strategy.
And I guess in your teams, and how do you build like a positive team culture? What I guess obviously sometimes it's probably a journey, but what do you think's worked best for you?
So I rely very heavily, I think, on the team being friends with each other, right? So having a team where they are really tight knit holds people together. People feel like they want to support each other. It helps with retention because people don't want to leave that kind of environment. It's like having everybody working together on a common goal, common objective. So the social side is very, very important. I think you've got to align incentives with, the person has to be rewarded when they do well. And if people know that they're not going to get rewarded when they do well, then they're going to try less hard to do that. So it's very important, I think, to recognise financially a lot of the time when people are being successful. I think you've got to give people something that's interesting to work on. So you've got to recognise when a job is boring. You've got to share that out equally so that you don't get people who are sick of their jobs. You've got to understand what each person wants to achieve and make sure you're aligning with that. So there's lots of things. There's a lot goes into it.
Yeah. Can you give any examples of what you think helped in building the positive team culture?
Yeah, so I think that there are lots of things you can do, but ultimately it's about making people feel invested in the team, making people feel like there is a reason for what they're doing. And part of that, very important. It's having some kind of feeling of responsibility towards other people in your team. But one of the things that I think that we did very early on, we didn't do this for everybody. It was something that we did early, but we cut people in. So everybody who was there in the first couple of years, everybody got equity. And what this does is it builds that really strong foundation of people who are really committed to the company's success. And I think that when you start with that solid foundation, everybody else kind of just feeds on that, and to a large extent, people compare themselves to the other people on the team. So if you've got that hardcore people who all really are pulling their weight, really are achieving, everybody else just falls in and does the same thing. So that's our biggest thing, was we gave people a financial stake in the company at the beginning.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah, certainly I think that can help. You've obviously been in the industry for 12, 13 years, so you probably come up against like conflict in your team quite often. So
yep.
Do you think it's a good thing? Do you think it's a bad thing? What are your sort of views on conflict?
I think that conflict in a high-performing team is inevitable, but you've got to do it right, So I can't remember what the exact quote was, but Jeff Bezos, I watched an interview with him where he had a quote, but your team has got to be able to disagree in the moment, but when you're making a call, everybody's got to respect the call and go with that. So it's good to get everybody's ideas out. It's good to hear all of the reasons why not. But ultimately, everybody does need to pull in the same direction at the end. So it's a case of, can you do it in a healthy way? It's not good to have conflict where people are disgruntled or they're constantly trying to pull in a different direction. That's bad. But you need to be able to be receptive to you're doing the wrong thing, or at least be able to hear that, and you have to then all come together. But yeah, if you're not having any conflict on your team, then that means that the leader isn't getting challenged, and that should be what's happening.
Yeah, so you think that could maybe affect growth as well within the team and the company?
Yeah, I mean, you don't want a team of people who just say yes. You want them to have opinions. It's actually it's something that I've pulled people up on a lot of times. you have never disagreed with me. Why not? You know, so
Yeah, that's quite
that's something that you want them to.
Yeah. And I guess that probably could bring us on to like psychological safety.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel in the companies you've worked in that, you know, has there been a culture of that? Do you think, you know, obviously team members in your team are, you know, can feel confident that they can bring up, you know, obviously things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest killers of productivity is when people are stuck and don't share, right? So you have to have a culture of, I'm having a problem, and actually that's a good thing that you shared. That's a sign of competence that you shared, because it actually gets you to the resolution faster. So it's very important to have that culture. So when CloudTrade got acquired by Advanced, we had a bit of a team merger where we took a lot of new people into the team, and there was a little bit of a culture difference between what I was running and the people that we brought into the team, and that was something that I had to instill that in them, that actually if you're struggling, say you're struggling. If you think something's going to take longer, tell me that, you know. I think it's important for a high-function team that you have good visibility, and you only get that if people feel safe to share that information.
Yeah. So I know we were speaking earlier, we were talking about diversity and allyship. I know you mentioned you'd seen a podcast of mine that I did with a TA leader where we talked about this topic. It was quite interesting because you were saying that at one point you had quite a lot of female developers in your team as well. Just wanted to obviously just you know, dig into that a little bit in terms of like how you found that, how did that situation come about? Because a lot of teams, we've done some research in the market where there's probably 93.5% male versus female ratio in development in the Northeast. Was that at CloudTrade or was that further on with Advanced?
Yes, this was at CloudTrade. I think there's times when, and we've spoken about this before, sometimes you have to acknowledge that the split in the job in the marketplace is that for every one woman there's 9 men, right? Yeah. So it's sometimes you have to acknowledge that we aren't diverse, but that's not our fault, you know. So I think that my teams have typically been quite diverse, but I've not really made a proactive effort to do it. I try to judge people based purely on their merits and just not bring it into all. I don't really believe in, you know, I think that if you're meeting quotas and things like that, then you are actually introducing bias, and I don't like that.
Yeah. Positive discrimination, I think.
Positive. Yeah, it is called. And I don't like that. I think that I have my own biases, and I think that that's to an extent led to me having a diverse team. So one of my biases I do have is I have a bit of a soft spot for people who have overcome barriers, in terms of like, did you overcome any barriers in order to get this job? And actually find that people with diverse backgrounds have normally overcome more barriers. Yeah. So, and I think that's fed into my teams being quite diverse, you know. Yeah. Just to give an example, I mean, I once hired somebody who was she was a refugee from Turkey. And she'd had to pick up the language. She had to change careers. She had to get on a plane with nothing but what she could fit in a suitcase and travel here, and then start a career. And she's overcome quite a lot of barriers there, you know. And that to me is, you give that person a job, you know.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Could you talk about a little bit about the journey then? So, CloudTrade got acquired by Advanced, and then you've worked at Advanced, and then from there you've joined.
Yep.
You've one of the founders, or you joined CloudConnect, and could you just tell me a little bit about that journey? Because
so, all the way from the beginning of CloudTrade,
I guess
forward.
What would be good to hear is like, obviously maybe like a bit of the because I appreciate there probably was quite a big culture shift in terms of you went from a startup to then being acquired by a large, one of the largest software companies.
It's a big company. I think they have 4,000 employees when I joined.
And maybe we could speak about like some of the, like, you know, obviously the differences in that. And I think obviously it must have been really rewarding as well for yourself, the leadership team, to obviously get investment initially, go through a couple of rounds of investment, then being acquired.
Yep.
What was that journey like, I guess, at each point?
Yeah, I suppose I'll just start from the beginning, I suppose. So obviously we talked a bit already, but I started with very minimal people. The first 5 years of my career were very hands-on development. I was just a developer. That's what I was. So I started out at the very beginning. I just did the stuff that the CTO didn't want to do. So it was all the stuff around the edges, but that very quickly progressed into, to an extent because I asked for it to happen, but progressed into me touching all of the system. And eventually, I was doing the most of the development because he was off doing CTO things a lot of the time. But that was 5 years, and we very much did not take investment. So we were organic growth. So our growth was about 40% a year for those 5 years, but we were growing from nothing. So it took a few years to get to a decent size. We took the investment 5 years in. So we took, I think we gave up a 20% stake in the company for investment. And we spent the next, I think it was 3 years, just growing as fast as we could. And that was my period of being in charge of management. My main job during that time was scaling the product. So we knew we wanted to grow. We needed the technology to keep up. So that was really what it was. We did a big piece around, I suppose, we transitioned into a microservice architecture. We moved into the cloud. We just made everything so that it would scale to almost an unlimited amount, because it didn't until that point. So we did that for a while. We got acquired it was just after COVID, so 2021. We got acquired by Advanced. So I was a part of the team that made that happen, I suppose. So it was all things like, engaging with, we had a consultancy who helped us to advertise ourselves, doing all like the technical due diligence, all that kind of stuff with Advanced. So there was a good 6 months to a year of that was my job, was, going through that acquisition process. We got bought by Advanced, all the senior leadership, and so the C level, so the CTO, they all retired. So they all and we integrated into the Advanced leadership, into the Advanced structure. There was a 6 month period where nothing much changed, right? So it was just in we go, and we had new bosses and things like that. But slowly they wanted to have us adopt their processes, their structures, all that kind of thing. So everything changed, So we went from it just being cloud trading, us running things our way, to this is how we run our software development process. This is what kind of structure our teams have. We were, as I say, my strategy is very minimal on everything. We didn't have a product department, we didn't have a DevOps department. We didn't, all this stuff we didn't have. I was doing about 6 different jobs. So my role got replaced with 2 software team leads. Well, not replaced because I was still there, but 2 software team leads, a QA team lead, a product manager, a product owner, and a scrum master. So I was doing all those roles before that.
Right.
So it was a culture shift, So there was a lot to adapt to. And now obviously I'm right back at the beginning. It feels like I'm back at the beginning. It's like I'm back in my comfort zone, really. But we're 5 people again, which is where I started. So we're back to 5 people, starting a new startup. So I'm just doing the journey again. Hopefully we do just do the journey again. That's what success looks like.
Yeah, I think it's great, 'cause we were speaking earlier. You've been down that path before, so you'll be well versed with like some of the challenges that can come up.
Yep.
Maybe know a little bit about the industries you're working in. You've already done management, leadership, so I think even for somebody joining your startup, it gives them that confidence that, okay, these guys have been on this journey before, and they can really help me grow. I imagine that if you interview a graduate, somebody new to their career, you can almost use yourself as an example. Look, like I joined the startup with 5 people, and that's how I progressed.
90% of our people that we've taken on have been fresh graduates, so or career changes. Yeah. So
it's just really interesting, because I don't think I've had many people who have been through like the acquisition, stage as well, or been acquired by a larger software company. Obviously, do you feel like you learned a lot in that 6 months to a year while that was happening, and maybe would bode well for the future if ever you go?
Yeah, I mean, I think every step of my career has been a learning curve, to be honest. But yes, you do learn a lot. I mean, there's a lot of you learn about your company is a product, so it's a product to an investor. So you learn what makes a good product. You learn what feeds into the valuation. There's an element of it doesn't matter what your valuation is. It doesn't matter if there's no buyer. So you've got to be aware who those people are. So some of the things I'm thinking of right now are, one day when we exit, who's going to want to buy it? Because I mean, maybe this will be something where I'm 60 and I retire, but likelihood is one day we're gonna be out in the market looking for somebody to buy. So who is that going to be? And even now I'm thinking about that.
Yeah, no, that's great, because I appreciate you probably weren't. I mean, I could be wrong, but maybe when you first joined, CloudTrade, you probably didn't have those
I
ideas
wasn't.
or thoughts.
I wasn't, but there was people in the business were, yeah.
What was it like going from 12 developers to like 30 developers? So I know that when Advanced acquired CloudTrade, you sort of, your team grew a lot as well. Was there a challenge? Was there like a higher workload? Like how did that period like affect you?
Yeah, I mean, it was actually less workload, quite honestly. It's
You're not doing seven different roles at once.
Exactly. There was a big transition, but my role got diluted quite a bit. It's actually I'm used to doing all these jobs. Suddenly, it's a lot less. So actually, it was actually one of the times in my life when I've had to do the least amount of work. Because there are other people doing those parts of my job. So
would that maybe influence how you work in the new company?
I like doing all the jobs, so it's my personal style. It is a personal style thing, but less is more in terms. I think I prefer generalists and specialists.
Right.
A lot of those roles I wouldn't have in my own company.
Okay.
So I quite enjoyed not having a product department. I quite enjoyed not having a scrum master.
Right.
So I'm. This is why I say my style is somewhat unusual in the industry, I suppose, on a lot of these things.
Yeah. So did you follow like agile principles? Were you a hybrid? Does anyone even follow agile to how it's supposed to be followed?
We mostly followed Scrum and Advanced. Before that, extreme programming is what Richard Devon, our CTO, was a fan of. But basically, it's so the concept behind extreme programming is that agile has strayed from its core concept of just do less, be more nimble, all that kind of stuff. Let's take it back to that, do as little as possible of all the extra process and all that kind of thing. Just code, just get stuff done. And it's a case of put process in when you need it, but if you don't. So the extreme program, I suppose, is the closest methodology to what we do, but actually it's just something I've made up as I've went along to a large extent. What
do you think some of the biggest lessons are in terms of now that you're sort of at the start of the journey again? Mm-hmm. What sort of things do you think that you're in a much better place now than you would have been if you were joining a startup in the position you're in terms of being in the leadership team? What do you think you can now bring to the new company?
I mean, there's lots of things, quite honestly. I mean, some of it, the culture things, I've learned some confidence in my own, what I'm doing. I mean, one of the things that you come in with the best intentions, right? So you come in thinking, trying to do things the way that you would like them to be done to you, right? So one of the things is I personally quite value autonomy, being able to pursue my own interests to a large extent, and this is that you have to be aligned and autonomous at the same time. Towards the start of my career, I think I was quite tolerant of people just going off on tangents, and I still am to an extent, but I think I've reined that in somewhat throughout my career, and I think you just learn through trial and error. There's some things that you can't learn in advance. You have to do it, and I think having gone through the process once allows you to go through it again, but it's a case of the first time around, your audience, I suppose, are watching this because they're not done the first time. You just got to do it. Just got to do it, and then the second time it's better. This, for me, this is my first time doing this. This is why I'm doing it, is because I'll do it the first time, and then second time, hopefully, I'll be better at it.
Yeah, no, definitely. I remember doing my first podcast as a host, and it's a lot easier now. Just getting everything set up and everything. So I understand. So we talked a little bit earlier. You've mentioned that you've probably interviewed hundreds of developers over your career. So I'd like to do a little segment on sort of interview tips and speaking about that element. So I'll have a lot like mid-level, senior, junior, even more senior people who maybe haven't interviewed for a while. So what would you say are some of the things that you really like to see from developers when you interview them, and also maybe what are some of the pitfalls or the red flags that you see as well?
Yeah, I mean, most of the people who I've hired have been graduates at the beginning of their career. I've hired some people later on in their career. But the main thing that I'm really looking for is that they are really invested in this career, right? So it's like they need to have a good reason for why they're doing it. They need to show signs of being driven, showing signs of doing something on their own time or being externally interested. This isn't just a job. This is what they want to do with their lives. So that's the main thing I'm looking for. In terms of do they have the skills to a large extent? If they've managed to get the degree, that's the evidence. I know I do give a test, so have they done the test? If they have, that's the evidence. To a large extent, the interview isn't about assessing their technical skills. It's not about assessing their problem-solving ability, really. It's mostly about culture fit, and it's mostly about, is this person doing it because they're passionate, or are they doing it because they just want to get paid? You know, and that's for me what the interview is mostly about.
What are some of the ways they can then show that it's not just a job for them, that it is a passion for them?
One of the big questions for me is, where do you see this going? You know, what is your long-term aspiration? If somebody wants to because they're passionate, they should have a long-term aspiration. So that's, you know, you weed a lot of people out because they're like, I don't know. There's a part of it is how did you get here? What you're asking me, how did you get here? And if a person has been like, well, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, so I just picked it random, then they're not who I want, right? But if the person says I did it because of all these reasons, and as a candidate, even if you don't have all those reasons, you should make some up. You know? Ideally, you should have all those reasons. But yeah, I mean, it mostly is about, and I've hired senior people, and with those senior people, you're asking about experience.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a slightly different interview.
What would you maybe look for in a senior developer?
A senior person, I suppose you're looking at what have they done before. You're looking for evidence of delivery. You're looking for evidence that it was actually them delivering, right? So you will ask them some technical things about, tell me something, you know, highly technical that you have delivered that was quite challenging. Tell me the challenges you encountered and how you overcame them. You want to say that if a person did the work themselves, they'll know what the challenges were and they'll know in detail how they overcame them. If it was just a complicated challenge that somebody else on the team solved, then they're not going to be able to tell you that detail. So it's those kind of questions. Yeah.
Do you have any, I guess, stories or experience of like some developers who have joined the business and then they've done really well in terms of like they've progressed really quickly, they've took on loads of stuff, and maybe what were their like attributes or characteristics that allowed him to do that?
Yeah, I mean, so he's not a person who he's not a person who I hired. You know, he's a person who was in our company, but somebody you placed. So Ty joined CloudTrade around the same kind of time as I did, right at the very beginning, not as a developer. So he spent a good number of years doing other jobs in the company, non-development jobs.
No, I didn't know that. What was he doing before?
So he was part of our operations team. So it was a bit of everything. It was the operations team's job was to essentially do everything that a person needed to do that wasn't already being done by somebody else.
Right.
You know, so it was everything, right? So lots of exposure to lots of things that the business needed to have happen. But it's not really a career, you know, like that's something that, or at least it wasn't at the time. It was just a mishmash of stuff. So I can't remember exactly when this would have been, but maybe like 3 years in, made the transition into I want to be a developer. Completely self-taught, and he completely self-taught primarily by reading our own code, right? So he went through our software, got his head around how does this work, right? Asked for a job on the development team. He was actually moving to Newcastle. He was from Southampton originally, moving to Newcastle where our development team was based. And we just said, yes, of course, you can have a job, and gave him because he was one of our key people. And this is what I'm saying about if somebody expresses an interest, try and facilitate that, you know. So we did facilitate that, and he progressed through. He progressed very quickly through. He didn't really spend very much time being an entry-level developer. Let's put it that way. Became one of the most senior people on the team very quickly. By the time he left our team, he was a principal engineer, right? So that was his job title when he left Advanced, because he stayed in Advanced. For Ty, I think it was just his time to move on. He'd been there for 10 years, and he'd seen the company through the whole journey, and he was ready for something else, came to you, and then you placed him, you know, so plug for you, plug for you.
Yeah, no, it sounds really good. So I was really interested in that, because I didn't even, that's probably showed how bad my qualification is, but I didn't realise that he started in a non-dev role at CloudTrade and then transitioned into that. Was he, with the self-taught element then, was that something he'd done in his own time after seeing what the company was doing, or had he...
Yeah, I mean, so you want somebody to do a certain level by themselves before you give it to them, you know? So the first thing if somebody is, how do I get into development? Well, go and read these websites, go and do some of your own kind of hobby projects. And then when they get past that point, it's like, right, we'll give you a little bit here, a little bit there.
Yeah.
And you just ramp them up, but yeah, that's he started doing it himself and then asked for some work,
Yeah. Well, has there been any, because obviously I know we've talked a lot about your management and leadership. When you were in your, I guess, early career, what sort of things do you think helped you when it came to like learning and developing your skills, like take your technical skills? So I appreciate you've done a lot of work yourself, self-learning, but what was that? Was it YouTube tutorials? Was it Pluralsight? Things of that nature?
Yeah, I mean, it's I wouldn't do it the same way now because it's a different time now. If I was doing it now, I'd be AI all the way. I'd be using ChatGPT and stuff like that. That's what I do right now. Start of my career, the very first thing, I'd done some stuff by myself. I went to university, and I've kind of had this strategy a little bit throughout my whole life. Is the first week I went to the university library, got a textbook out on Java and read it cover to cover, and I did that in the first week, and so I'd read that by the end of the first week. After that, it was very much I like to get conceptual understanding, but then learn by doing. So I went and did some of my own code projects, so I did code projects for the first 3 months, and I'd gotten to the point where I was like 3 months into university where I'd really done the first year, so I just got myself ahead on coding by reading a textbook and doing some work, and that's where I was then. But the internet wasn't where it is now, It's I do it differently now.
Yeah, with AI, I mean, it's very topical at the moment. Where do you think you are with it in terms of your own company? Is it something that you've looked into to add into your tech stack?
We are, very much. So for AI has gotten a lot. A lot has been happening over the last few years, So AI for a very long time has been something that has been our enemy. It's our solution was better than AI. But AI is what people want to have, right? So we have a solution that is almost fully automated. There's a little bit of human interaction. It's not a neural network, or at least it wasn't a neural network. So that's where I've been for the vast majority of my career, is arguing that actually the AI, it sounds good, but it's not going to get you the accuracy rates you want. It's going to be more expensive than you want it to be, all that kind of thing. It's gone to the point now where LLMs have reached a certain point where there are some use cases now for them that didn't used to exist. We are integrating LLMs into our tech stack. It's very industry specific. A lot of our competition, we do data capture from invoices. Our competition use a neural network to do that data capture. They get, say, high 90s in terms of accuracy rates of their capture. And their costs are very low, but their accuracy isn't 99.99. It's 96, say, right? And if you want to remove the human from the equation, that's not good enough. If you want to pay an invoice, it's not good enough for it to be 98% accurate. That's nowhere near. So what we've been doing has been using a deterministic, rules-based approach to capture, where for each different type of invoice we receive, a human physical person has got to do some work writing in code. This is what that looks like, and then our engine can use that to automate it going forward, and that's our business model. We've reached the point now where the LLM can replace that person to a large extent. It can replace those deterministic rules with about 70% accuracy, which is not really high, but it reduced our workload by 70%, and or at least 70% of documents we don't need to do anything for, and then the rest of it decreases massively. So we fully have integrated the LLMs into our workflow at this point, but we're not doing it the same way as the competition. The competition are getting the AI to do the whole job, and we're not. We're getting it to do part of the job and the time-consuming part of the job.
Yeah.
Right? So we are, but we're taking a bit of a different... We're trying to solve a very specific problem, not the whole problem.
Yeah. So do you think it's still important to have that human element to the rest of it? Because I appreciate it's going to be time-saving exercise, but still you need that quality.
Yeah, I think in general, I think that people try to eliminate the whole human, and I don't think you should. I think that what you should do is you should take your humans and you should do a pie chart of what does this human do, and what accounts for, say, 70% of their work, and you just eliminate that part. You know, you don't need to eliminate the whole of their job. You need to eliminate the time-consuming parts of their job.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you need less people now, or your costs come down one way or another.
Yeah.
But when people try to eliminate the whole human, they get diminishing returns, and that's not really where you want to be. I don't think.
So I think we're still yet to see AI build something that is, you know, super complex in terms of there's no like human element required at all. So do you think we are still quite a way away from that?
Depends what you're doing. So there's things that AI is doing now that it didn't used to be able to. It's every year the future comes closer, you know. It's, so we've been talking within our company because that's where our threats have been coming from. You know, it's like 10 years ago, people were using neural networks to solve this kind of problem. And, you know, in our industry, we talk about it as accuracy, you know. So you'd be maybe getting like 80%. And every year that goes up, right? So now it's the high 90s. So the competition is bigger from AI, right? But it's still not in a lot of areas there. You know, it's coming closer, but it's not there. And I think a lot of time people jump on it too early, you know. And I think a lot of times people make the mistake of jumping too fast, and then they're just it's not the right time yet. The right time's coming, and you need to be ready when it does come. But a lot of times people jump on too fast. They try to go too far, and they ultimately you see a lot of people trying to replace right now their support teams with AI and stuff like that, and then rolling it back a year later, you know, because the AI is not ready yet.
Yeah, yeah. So you feel that it's not too far away then from being at a stage where it's ready or as close as possible?
I think that most people should probably be making attempts to replace whatever their current approach is with AI in a kind of speculative way where we know that this isn't going to give us the results right now, but we want to be embarked on that journey, so we know when it's time. You know, we know when the AI's getting there. You know, we know when because we've been dipping our toes in the AI for years.
Yeah.
You know, we've always had a feel for how close is it now.
Right. Yeah. And do you think it could affect jobs for developers?
The jobs are going to change, but no, I think that it's a double-edged sword. Double-edged sword is the phrase. But yeah, I mean, I think that you don't need as many developers to do the same amount of work, right? So developers can work faster now, is how I feel. So if you have a project that would take a year, now it's going to take 3 or 4 months, right? So in that sense, you need less developers. But on the other side, there's a lot of work that you would have not done because it's not worth it. So the payoff is just not happening for this project because it's going to take us 6 months to do it, and it's not worth it. Whereas now, it is worth it. So there's a lot of jobs opening up where in the past you wouldn't have done that work, where now you can do that work effectively. So it's who knows whether or not it's going to be an increase or a decrease. But
yeah, but I guess the opportunities are there. I guess in terms of being able to work more projects and more efficiently. And
well, I think we're seeing it, right? That a lot of people are losing their jobs, right? So there's a lot of teams are downsizing because they don't need the same developers to do the same work. But opportunities are opening up to replace those jobs that have just been, you know what I mean? I don't think the industry is going to long-term shrink. I think that it's going to long-term grow, but there'll be some disruption.
Yeah. Could you envision with your new company hiring in AI or in that space in the future?
Well, everybody is going to have, at least in our company, everybody is going to have AI skills, but I wouldn't hire an AI specialist. I think that, in my view, it's not a specialist skill. It's a skill that everybody needs to integrate into.
Right.
Or at least that's what my company is going to be like. I think it depends what the job is.
Generalists, all right.
Depends what the job. I like generalists. I do like generalists. I mean, me myself, I've done all of the different types of thing that you could do in a tech company. I think, more or less.
Yeah. So we were speaking a little bit earlier about family. So I've got one son. You've got three children. Eldest 11. Started to get into tech. So just I was wondering if you could just speak a little bit about that and obviously how that makes you feel as well.
Yeah. So my boy Lewis, he's he like me, I suppose, started off with games. So he started off Minecraft. You know, actually, age about 3 or 4, he started getting into Minecraft, which lots of people don't like the idea of their kids getting into that kind of thing. But for me, Minecraft personally is amazing for children of a young age to learn skills that translate into things like development eventually. You know, there's a lot in it that translates quite well. But that's where he started. He's got a YouTube channel now, so he's Captain Bick is his name. So
wow.
he said I needed to plug him on here if I had a chance.
Amazing.
But so he's got a YouTube channel. But so last year he built his own computer, and that's because he wanted a gaming computer. He really wanted a gaming computer. He asked for Christmas, and he just wanted to do it himself. So we bought him the compute parts, and he figured out how they went together and all that kind of stuff. And I steered him a little bit. But for me, it's just I want him to have an interest in something that one day in the future might translate into career, and it's up for him to be self-directed because you can't force this kind of thing.
Yeah.
But for me, it's really encouraging that he's into this kind of stuff because it translates into a job later on, and it translates into you picking up skills that, you learn a lot more if you're interested than if you're doing it because you have to.
I think he's got a good mentor to look at in yourself because you, crossed, from our conversation, I think from an early age you knew what you wanted and what you liked and what you didn't like, and I think obviously there's certain influences. Obviously, you spoke about the story about your grandmother, so there will be certain things that influence him over the coming years. But I think having you there is great because you went through a similar journey, and with a lot of people,
I'm nodding away saying yes. I probably shouldn't be too self-congratulatory.
Yeah, but obviously, a lot of the people I speak to on this podcast do appreciate the career they've had in tech because it's been very rewarding for them.
Well, it's a very deliberate choice to me. I mean, I remember looking. I very much tried to keep my options open until I had to close them down. So I didn't pick a career for definite until I had to, which was what degree am I going to do? But I was just looking around what jobs exist, right? And actually in the Northeast, in 2008-ish, right, which is when I was doing what exists. Well, not a lot because financial crisis and all that, So tech, I was like, well, that's where it's at, So that's what I went and did.
I mean, one question I was going to ask earlier, but it kind of slipped my mind, was talking about like the COVID period. So you mentioned that CloudTrade was acquired almost after. So
it's just after, yeah.
What was that period like? Was it still business as usual? Was there like a downturn? What was it like for you? And what was there any challenges?
So it was. We did have quite a significant one actually. So we did grow during the COVID period, but that was just because we were growing. So our business has very much always been tied to the economy. So we see, for instance, we have dips in summer holidays, and things like that, because we earn money every time somebody pays an invoice, right? So during COVID, we immediately lost about 20% of our revenue because our customers stopped doing business. A lot of our customers went out of business. So there was a very immediate impact. We survived just because we were growing, and it was as simple as that. We were carried through on our existing momentum, So it was a challenge. There was a big. We all counted as key workers, so we were allowed to go into the office and things like that, but we didn't. Because we did a lot of work for the government, so in the NHS and things like that. But yeah, we had a big shift from working in an office, because we were working in an office, to now working at home. We had quite a strong online remote work type culture anyway, because we had our development team was based in Newcastle, but everybody else was based in London. So we had quite a strong culture of most of our stuff happens online anyway. So the transition wasn't that dramatic. We didn't have a stand-up at all until that point, but we introduced one because it's like we need one of these now. It's like there's no way of running this and have us all touch base regularly. We didn't need one in the office because we were all just there talking to each other all the time anyway. But we introduced a stand-up process. And it's just things of like making sure people don't go missing, and things like that you are keeping track of each other and keeping in the loop and all that kind of thing.
Yeah. So I think for you in the new business is great because you've been through periods of when, like you said, financial crisis, COVID, and I think at the moment there is probably a bit of an economic downturn really. So it can affect businesses, but I think resilience is probably a big thing. And if you've been through periods like that, it just bodes well for the future, I think, in knowing that you've been in environments like that and you've took lessons from that as well. Yeah.
So I mean, I'm quite. I like to know that I'm safe, right? So whenever I do things, I make sure that my worst case scenario is not too bad. So for us, a very large early challenge starting the business is how do we guarantee that we can keep this going for the foreseeable future and we don't run out of money? You know, so it's very important to us to do things like structure our commercial arrangements such that we had the least amount of risk possible. So it's like, where are the fluctuations to our expenses going to come from, and can we build that into our contract so that if our expenses go up, our revenue goes up to match, right? And things like that, and just trying to, you know, keep our living expenses down as part of starting a new company. I think for everybody to have to do that. Yeah. But I mean, I like to keep my options open and be sure that I'm going to have a future. We talked very early on about what my criteria were for picking a company to join, and it had to be business to business. And for me, that meant that you had to be delivering tangible value to a company, because that's one of the last things to go in a struggling economy. It had to be genuinely value adding, and it couldn't be just, you know, something that the customer's going to one day realize they don't need. You know, so those things for me help to, you know, ensure that safety, ensure that your job's not going to go away.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, obviously, wish you all the best in your journey as a startup. It sounds really exciting, and I think you've got a lot of experience. I know you mentioned some of the other leadership team there, so experience of doing this. So, yeah, I'm wishing you obviously a bright future with that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed the chat as well. So thank you for making the trip down, and thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Yeah.